Okay. Now to see. Okay, so it's connecting.
Connection!
Okay, I am going to open up the stream link and make sure it's all coming through and it's all working. So give me a second.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we? And also going to keep talking so I'm not hearing a moment of silence when I do have the thing open. So please excuse the random noise. So if you could add your own random noise, that would be appreciated.
How's that?
It's certainly a random noise.
Yeah, I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. A random noise.
Indeed. Alright,
Fish,
so
fish, 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 fish.
it's live at the moment. Let's have a look. Okay, opening it up, see how it's coming up. Indeed. Alright,
Fish,
so
fish, 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 fish.
it's live at the moment. Let's have a look. Okay, opening it up, see how it's coming up. Indeed. Alright,
Fish,
so
fish, 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 fish.
it's live at the moment. Let's have a look. Okay, opening it up, see how it's coming up. Indeed. Alright,
Fish,
so
fish, 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 fish. Fish.
live at the moment. Let's have a look. Okay, opening it up, see how it's coming up. Indeed. Apparently my thing is on a loop. That's weird. Alright,
Fish, fish,
so
fish, fish, fish. Fish.
live. Apparently my live stream was on a loop. Okay, hey everyone. We were just testing to make because I can see people are joining. I was just testing to make sure everything is working. Can you hear me okay? It sounded like I was on a loop just then. Am I still on a loop or is everything good?
Ooh, that reminds me, I have to open up the...
No, it's saying no data.
Yep, let me just,
Okay, it's got a wear good from Cat.
I hear things that aren't looping. Good!
Okay. That's good, that's good. Alright, so, got that out. So, as always, we're going to wait about 10 minutes or so just to let people file in before we start on the main discussion of topic.
Also, mind tossing the link into DC chat?
You do that, and could you also do me a favor and toss it into general? Because, actually, you know, fuck it, I'll do it.
I mean, there's the stream alerts where we put the links instead of general.
I will do that.
Also, Angel of Speed was nice enough to put the thingamajig into general. So, thank you for that, Angel.
Indeed, thank you very much. Stram alerts. And I'll toss it into a couple of other places as well.
Oh boy! You did not miss anything, we are still setting things up. I am fishing on the background and making sounds.
So for for people who are just coming in, as I say, I'm gonna give it about 10 minutes to let people come in. I apologize for doing this later than fairly late for a lot of you. I would have done it earlier, but my sleep schedule has been kicking my ass.
Yeah.
Right, Second, where is it? What a shame.
Hope all is well for you, Lunacorva, and you too. Thank you.
Everything is well for me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm just slightly on the tired side, but that's to be expected.
Okay, you know what? Maybe I should start doing podcasts at this hour because apparently it's a good one. There's actually a lot more people coming in than I thought there would be. So either this is actually a good time to do things, or it's a case of like, what time is it over in the States for you guys? Because I know most of you are stateside.
(8:42 p.m.), quarter to midnight.
Huh.
Yeah, so it is getting late on the night, but let's remember, most of us stay up pretty late.
Indeed, you're all psychos.
Like me! We're in a good company over here right now.
Yes, yes, we are. So, how long have we been streaming for? Ark, what the hell is Ark? What the fuck is sleep? Anyway, how long have we been streaming for?
Give me a few seconds. I can't
Okay.
look away from the screen when I cast the thing, and you asked it the same exact second when I tossed it in. No bloody idea.
Oh, right, bug. I have no idea either.
About 7.5 minutes.
7.5 minutes? Cool. Wait a minute. Oh, wait. There we go. Trying to find, because it usually has a thing that tells you how long you're streaming for. Okay, so 7 minutes and 43 seconds. Cool.
Yes, you're all crazy, so am I. Don't mind me, I'm just about to crash the fish market in my server.
Not wrong, Ark, not wrong. Anyway, so yeah, still got about 2 more minutes that we will minutes that we'll just hang out before we get to the main topic of discussion.
Did you just move away from your laptop by any chance?
I did.
Yeah, that explains that.
Sorry about that. I've got a wireless headset, it's finicky. For explanation to others, I've got a wireless headset, it's finicky. Sometimes it will be fine even if I go like halfway across the house. Other times I just need to stand up and it'll be like, whoa, no, too far away, too far away.
Yeah, it might be the best idea to stay still when you're streaming. Well,
Indeed.
still-ish.
I try to stay as still as I can, but it's also me.
He needs to pace to think, Jogi.
It's not that I need to pace to think, it's just thinking makes me pace.
Yeah, unfortunately, because your headset is like that, it might be best not to pace too much.
I am aware of this.
For the enjoyment of the stream. I say this as someone who has been streaming for a while. Nothing kills a stream faster than a bad mic quality.
I am aware of this. By the way, how's my mic coming out as it is?
Pretty good.
Brilliant.
But yeah, if I need to pace, I usually just start swinging myself back and forth on my chair.
I'm also playing Minecraft. It's like I'm sort of pacing the game as it is, so that helps too.
Yee. My sleep schedule better. There was a time I would only get about 2 hours of sleep due to stress and this. Okay. Oof.
Holy shit! Even I get more than 2 hours. That sounds horrific. I'm very glad that it is better.
Yeah, I've started only getting like 4 hours of sleep, waking up middle of the day, which is bad for me. Then either pacing a little bit or falling back asleep. It's very annoying. Whee! How are you not dead from sleep deprivation? My guess is he got all full 10 hours in pieces.
We sure it's a he? I don't know, just like the name Honey. Yeah.
He, she, they, it. And I'm allowed to say it because that is one of my own pronouns. People just don't use it a lot because it makes it uncomfortable.
I'm guessing the it is referring to the good God, what is that thing?
No, it is more of a. You know all the things we call it in this world?
Mostly inanimate objects, yes.
We also call sunset. We call all sorts of emotion it. I have never seen anyone call a river she or he.
I mean, I think I found that when naming inanimate objects, they often refer to them as either it or she, so it's more likely a river would be called she than it would be called he.
Ye-
Like how we name boats she. Well, that's not the topic of this video.
Animals get called it too.
Yeah. Well, that's not the topic of this video. I've always said my best way of explaining the difference between gender... One of my best ways I found for explaining the difference between gender and sex is we call boats she, and they don't have any sexual characteristics. And if they do, what the fuck?
Keep him away from fur affinity.
Yeah, no. If I ever find a boat that has actual biological genitalia on it, I'm screaming Cthulhu for target and launching myself into the sun. And yet, we assign it a gender. But anyway, now that it is a good past 10 minutes and we have got a fairly...
And we have deeply scored everyone in the chat.
Yes. There is a reason this is not a for kids chat. Anyway, I'd say it is time to begin the stream in earnest. So first of all, welcome everyone. I am sincerely sorry it took so long for the second episode of this bloody thing. But due to various reasons, many of which were not related to each other, more of a cavalcade of fuck-ups, we kept missing the week to stream and kept putting it off until finally we're here, not on the day we usually stream, but fuck it. I didn't want to make people wait another week. But yes, here we are.
There was Christmas time, holidays, and all that happened, and then we started having sleep issues.
Yep. Can you tell I'm really organized? I mean, to be fair, Sound, your normal is not most people's normal. But again, most people who are joining a podcast from me are kind of used to this bullshit. Now then. Sorry, doggy?
No, I'm just going to do.
Fair enough. So, for the topic of this episode of the podcast, I was actually watching a video recently about the... Okay, so you're all just a quick question. How many of you are familiar with the literary canon? And if you don't know by that name, you know it as the books you're taught in school as the best books of all time. Your classics, your Moby Dicks, your Shakespeare's, your Jane Austen, the books that you're supposed to read, your Lord of the Rings, etc., etc. We all know them. We all know how much they're hyped up.
Fun fact, in Finland, when
yes?
I was growing up in my school, we didn't have those books. We weren't told to read those books. We were told to pick up a book that we liked and read that. Granted, I was in a special class because I had a hard time focusing, so it could be very... So my experiences do not dictate all the Finnish kids' experiences.
And it's not... And same with here. Like, in Australia, we weren't told that... We weren't necessarily assigned those books. There are several of those that I haven't read myself. But I think we all understand the general perception that these are the good books. These are the definitions of good books, and if you read them, you are, by definition, more intelligent and more well-read than people who do not read them. They're not just a marker of their own quality, they're a marker of the quality of the people who read them. We're all familiar with that perception.
All the hands in the chat.
Mm-hmm. And because of this, there is been a recent backlash against them. A feeling that that it is pretentious to hold them on such a pedestal, that they're overrated, that there shouldn't be a, as it's referred to, literary canon. And of course there's been a backlash against the backlash. These books are good. They're good for a reason. You should have a, books that are presented as better than others because it's a mark of quality. Of course they're better than modern or popular fiction. Are you really going to say Romeo and Juliet is a better love story? Are you really going to say that Twilight is a better love story than Romeo and Juliet? Get serious. So, I wanted to look at this back and forth argument and kind of give my own takes about them. About the classics and how I feel that the attitude, and my feelings on the attitude towards them, because I feel the attitude towards them is more important to be discussed than the books themselves. And I will pause in my speaking just for a second to read the chat and have a look at other people's feelings on the matter. Miss Cantus Dragon, why were you gagging? Sorry, Miss Arkansas Dragon. Why were you gagging?
It's called Arkansas!
I did that specifically to annoy her. Ah,
Gagging at
yes,
the Twilight comment.
indeed. So, let me consider where to begin on this. First, I think part of the problem in the discussion is the discussion has started to go down to whether these classics are good or not, and in my opinion, that is a flawed discussion from the start. Because it misses the problem on both sides. If you are saying that the books within the literary canon are bad, I think you're missing the problem with that it actually exists with having a literary canon in the first place. And conversely, if you think that people are saying that, or if you think that people are, or if you're focusing on people who are saying that the books within the literary canon are bad, I think you're missing the actually substantial argument. And besides, yeah, those books became well liked for a reason. They did things that people enjoyed. They did things that people liked. The problem, I think, with having books that are held up as by default better than every other book is that it starts to ironically lower people's critical thinking. And I want to give some examples of that, and I think a good one would be the Twilight Romeo Juliet comparison. Is Romeo and Juliet a better love story than Twilight? I would say yes. And I would also say it's a better story just in general. And I also think most people would agree. But here is my question. How many people would actually be able to give you a substantial reason why Romeo and Juliet is better than Twilight, besides, well, one is a classic and the other is not? See, the problem when we hold certain books up as the classics is we stop analyzing them critically because, in a way, we are encouraged not to. In logic, in debates, or in arguments, one of the worst things you can do is establish a conclusion and then have all your logic aimed towards reaching that conclusion. Because at that point, you are no longer thinking, what is the right answer? You are thinking, how can I convince myself my answer is right? So if you start from the premise of this book is good, it must be good, then instead of actually analyzing the book on its own merits and thinking, is this good? Why is this good? Is it perhaps not as good as I thought it was? Etc., etc. You start instead telling yourself, no, you have to reach this conclusion. For example, do you think that, Lord of the Rings has some serious pacing issues? Well, that can't be it. Lord of the Rings is a classic. It's a good book. If you think it has pacing issues, well, clearly there must be something wrong with you. Do you enjoy this book of modern fiction a little bit more than one of the books in the classics? Well, that means you have terrible taste. It can't be that the classic book itself is missing an element that has strong appeal to you. And we're going to get to that in a second, but once again, I am turning my attention over to the chat to get your thoughts. So, quick thing on Arkansas Dragon. As I have learnt through people who are far more intelligent and studied in the books than I am, it is actually both. It is both a love story and a tragedy, but a lot of people overemphasize one side more than the other. But that is still off topic. In either case, you can easily just replace the word "is it a better love story" with "is it a better book?" And even if we're looking at it just as a love story, considering the amount of abuse that is present in the Twilight books, yeah, even the quite broken and doomed to fail relationship of Romeo and Juliet was a lot better than the abusive mess that was Edward and Bella. That is also a good point from Blue Griffin, and I think it also leads to a larger point with having a literary canon. It is a canon that is decided by the few, not the many. Now, obviously, a book being popular does not necessarily mean it is good. A book selling well does not necessarily mean that it is good. But the opposite problem happens when you have your best books of all time decided by a small group of experts. Because what is good to one person is not good to another. Now, does this mean there is no such thing as quality? Certainly not. But when we look at judging quality, I think we can judge elements, but the overall composition and how that affects a person, that's something that is ultimately subjective. Let's go to the Lord of the Rings example. I said just a second ago that Lord of the Rings has some severe pacing issues. I maintain that thought. It does. But I have heard the argument that the slow pacing of Lord of the Rings makes it more immersive by taking its time to give you every detail in the lives, even the mundane ones. It makes the world feel more real. It makes the world feel more lived in. It makes it feel like you are journeying with these people on their day-to-day lives in a fantastical world that becomes more grounded. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Is this person wrong? Well, to say that they are wrong is to put fast pacing above detailed, grounded and realistic immersion. To say that I am wrong is to basically make a judgment on myself that, oh, you don't like anything that's not fast-paced action movies. Let's face it, a lot of these arguments will often come down to hyperbole and insults on the quality of a person. But I don't think either is wrong. I think one is appealing to one sensibility and sense of taste, and the other goes against a different person's sensibility and sense of taste. When you have a... One second.
They're yelling fading mic. Which is weird because you're not fading for me at all.
Yeah, that is weird. Literally nothing about my mic has changed. Like, I wasn't moving, I was in the exact same position, I didn't touch any setting, nothing was changed. Am I still fading?
How's the stream status?
Excellent connection. All right. Anyone else having that issue? Because it was just Ark yelling that.
Gajillion, i.e. Matt, said, "Now you're good." Yeah, Arceus said it was my headphones, sorry, yeah.
All right.
Honeydrop says, "No issues," and Wicked says, "You're good."
Indeed. And Samway's comment about it focusing more on world building than characters. For some, that is a strength, and for others, that is a flaw. Like for me, I prefer stories that focus more on the characters, but others will be more interested in the world building. But it gets to the point that even with the classics, there are things that appeal to some people and things that don't appeal to some people because, again, art is ultimately subjective. When we look at the quality, we judge the quality of how well something achieves a goal, but the goal itself and whether that goal is a good thing or a bad thing, that's always going to be up for debate. And when you have books that are put on a pedestal as if you don't like them, there is something wrong with you, that's where it starts to get into the position of, okay, you are, and let me back up a bit because I had the idea in my head, but not the wording of it quite finalized. But when you have the idea that you have to like these books or there is something wrong with you, again, as I said from the start, you start to get into a position where you are no longer thinking critically because you are no longer challenging your perceptions. You're no longer challenging your ideas and examining, why did I like this? What was good about it? Can I notice any flaws about it? Because you're telling yourself you have to reach this conclusion. And that's always a bad thing with study. Ah, but notice what you just said there, Ark. Also, how far... I hope I'm not too far ahead. But notice that exact words they said. Or you said, or so I heard. How many times do we look at the classics with the mentality of, well, I'm told X, Y, or Z about them, therefore it has to be true?
Basically, citation needed, evidence required.
Indeed, and when it comes to stories, the main thing often is to look at and read and check it out for yourself. But in order to do so, one needs to have an open mind. Indeed. And what were your thoughts on the book, Ark? Well, the books.
One book, two book, three book.
Red book, blue book.
Everybody gets a book.
Indeed. Uh, I was just asking Ark what her thoughts on The Lord of the Rings were. Because she said she read them. I'm not sure what question I said that Soundwave was answering there. Which makes me worried. I don't know, am I cutting out or something?
I needed audiobook version to get through them reading, put me to sleep.
Indeed. Indeed, thanks for sharing. Like I said, this is not, and I want to stress this and repeat this is not an argument that these books are bad, actually. It is not an argument that they're overrated. It's not an argument that they're bad. It is not an argument that they shouldn't be read. It is an argument against putting them on a pedestal and saying that one interpretation of them or reading of them is more valid. It is not a saying that they aren't good. It is an argument against the idea that you have to think they are good, or else something is wrong with you.
Okay, so we've answered. Yep, so we've answered why they were tossing the names.
Ah, yes, thank you very much. That was quite a while ago, so I was worried that, wow, is like the stream really far behind what I'm actually saying? That was my worry. Hey, Dogu, could you do me a favor?
Yeah?
Could you open up the live stream, please, and just have a listen to the last thing that is said on the stream? Just to make sure there's not like a huge delay.
Sure. Let me just make sure this thing has caught up, and I will mute and deafen myself on my own end, because otherwise I will get a headache from the loop.
Understood. Okay. Okay, it sounds like we're good. I was worried there for a second. So, again, that is the first point of my premise. We shouldn't tell people these stories aren't good, actually. That's reductive. But we shouldn't tell people that they have to like them either, or that they are the quote-unquote only books worth reading. Because when it comes to being a fan of something, you can give a person a recommendation, but imagine if this applied to literally anything else. Hey guys, if you don't listen to Within Temptation, you don't have any taste in music. You have to listen to it, you have to like it, and if you don't, there's something wrong with you. Hey everyone, My Little Pony is a great show. If you don't like it, you're an idiot. You clearly don't have the intelligence to know good from bad. You better enjoy it, or there's something wrong with you. Imagine in schools if it was a case of anything else. Okay, here's my book. Here is my book report on. Here's my book report on Harry Potter. Okay, what do you think of it? Well, I mean, there are parts I liked, but ultimately I felt that there were several major plot holes and the ending was very anticlimactic. So I'm going to give it a D. Cool. You fail the class. That is also a good point. Sorry, what?
Is it really like that in the school, that if you reason why you don't like a book and give it a low rating, you fail a class?
I believe that was probably an exaggeration. Certainly it certainly never happened with me, but I feel this is more a social perception. The idea that, for example, if you think if you think the works of Shakespeare aren't actually that great, there must be something wrong with you. If you did not particularly enjoy this book in the classics, well, clearly you are a plebeian who doesn't know any better, etc., etc. If you feel that certain books are overhyped or they don't appeal to you, or you think there is something they were trying to do but didn't quite do them as well as they intended, that's not the flaw of the book, that's something wrong with you. And this attitude starts to limit discussion. like Wicked Cat said, the education system is not a total failure, though knowing the human race, I'll bet you there is at least a few examples of teachers that have failed their students because they gave, I don't know, Wuthering Heights a bad review. But as I always say, you can find fringe cases for everything. Indeed. Like, my feelings on 2001 A Space Odyssey, I feel Citizen Kane is almost impossible to judge nowadays because what made it groundbreaking then is something that is commonplace now, and that's really hard to judge because it's hard to take yourself out of the modern perspective and into the perspective of someone from, over almost 100 years ago at this point. With 2001 Space Odyssey, I feel like the problem of it went so hard on being suspenseful that it reached the point where it was no longer suspenseful and you were just waiting for the next point to happen. It was no longer waiting on the edge of your seat. It was, give me a second, I'm going to make a coffee. Oh, we're still going? You know what, I might make myself a pizza pocket.
Pizza.
Yes. But still, aside from the education system, the larger point is the social context, and that leads me to my second point. This is probably the most damaging of all. When it becomes a mark of... There's a difference between the quality of the book being a mark of the book's quality, when it's a mindset of, you gotta read this. This is one of my favorite books. I genuinely think this is one of the best books of all time. You are going to love it. It'll love it. It is honestly a disservice to you to not read it. That is the attitude that, for example, the Overly Sarcastic Reduction series takes to a lot of the classics. They take to it with an air of enthusiasm, with an air of fandom, and that is something that should still be encouraged and should still be held up. Fandom and love for books, classics, modern, etc., is always something to be encouraged. Where the biggest problem starts, and where all this leads to, is not, these books are fantastic, you owe it to yourself to read them. It is, if you have read this book, your intelligence is far above any of the plebeians. You can quote Star Wars, I quote Shakespeare. That makes me far more intelligent and a superior breed of human than you. Now, exaggeration, obviously, but there is still, in a way, that there is still that mindset. There is still that mindset that the books are no longer a mark of their own quality, they are a mark of the quality of their reader. If you read these books, you are a superior human being to those who read other books.
Let's be fair, that's not the book's fault. People like that will always find a way to feel superior to others, whether it be because what they read, what they've accomplished, or, well, usually it's what they read because they can't accomplish too many things in their life anyways. So they have to take superiority over petty little things like that.
Did I ever say that it was the book's fault?
You did not. I'm just clarifying.
Okay, and yes, as I said from the start, this is not about these books are bad, actually. This is not about saying that you shouldn't enjoy those books or that they shouldn't be held up as good books. Let's face it, they are good books. Even the ones I have criticized, there are many good and worthwhile things about them. Clarification, because what you said, Ark, was mindset of classics make you snooty. That is grammatically incoherent, so I don't know what you actually said that. Are you asking me if I'm talking about the mindset, or that the mindset of classic make you... Okay, I have no idea what you actually said there, Ark. It was a confusing sentence. I'm sorry. Now, the issue is not... But the issue is not that reading the classics makes you snooty. It does not. Again, Red from Overly Sarcastic is a lover of the classics, and she is hardly snooty, even though I do feel she is incredibly biased against the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but that's neither here nor there. And it isn't even in the problem that snooty people... That is not what I said at all, Ark. Not even remotely what I said at all. In fact, it's almost the opposite of what I said, to the point where I'm now confused and concerned because I am not sure how what I said could have led you to such an interpretation, and I'm wondering what was wrong with how I presented my sentence. How did I fail to communicate so terribly? Everyone else, is that the takeaway you got from what I was saying?
Oh, Ark apparently misheard you.
Okay, I was very worried for a second there that I had absolutely failed in my ability to communicate my sentences and ideals. So, to reiterate, there is a mindset that the classics are not a mark of their own. The quality of the classic is not a mark of how good they are, but how good the reader is. A mindset, an unfortunately very common mindset, that reading the classics makes you a better, smarter person than not reading them. You can quote Star Wars? Commoner trash. I can quote Shakespeare, clearly a sign of my superior breeding as an intellectual. We all know how common this mindset is. And the problem is not that this mindset exists, because, let's face it, as Dogi said, there's gotta be snobs about anything. No, the biggest problem is that this mindset is held up as canon. It is not a few snobs who think that reading or enjoying these books makes you a superior and more intelligent person to those who don't. It is held up as fact. It is held up as undeniable truth. If you read these books and enjoy them, you are a better person than those who don't. And this, I believe, is the main crux of the issue and where the pretentiousness idea comes from. It does not come from the idea that you should or shouldn't like these books. They have good reasons for people to like and enjoy them. It comes from the attitude that one person's taste denotes the quality and intelligence of them as human beings. The way it's looked at, if someone gave a well-reasoned and articulated essay on the quality of, let's say, what's a good example? If someone gave a well-researched, strong essay on the quality of a modern Godzilla movie over, let's say, Frankenstein, where that person would be seen as less cultured and less intelligent than the person who says, Frankenstein good because it classic, Godzilla bad because it new. Even though one person gave a well-researched and articulated argument for the popular movie over the classic, the one who says that the classic movie is better is seen, or story is better, is seen as less intelligent and an inferior sort of person. That is the mentality that should be gotten away from. Because that is a mentality that... What's the word I'm looking for? Ignores... That's, I would say, yeah, stifles. That is the mentality that stifles critical thinking. Because in order to think critically, you need to have an open mind. And if you say these books are inherently superior, that is no longer being open-minded. That is starting from a position of close-mindedness. The other problem is, and I touched on this a little, but I want to speak on it more. Everyone has different tastes and experiences, and if you limit yourself to the taste of experiences of a small group of others, then you start to... Not only will you be a fish reading books on how to climb a tree and find yourself very confused, but from a perspective of becoming a new writer, we are all influenced by what we consume. And if you only consume from the same small pool of stories, your own writing is going to become limited. Writing itself starts to become homogenized because we're all writing the same things. But there is a breadth of stories out there that aren't in the classics, and not because the people who wrote the classics are wrong, but simply because they're people. There are going to be stories that didn't appeal to these individuals, and it is a small group of individuals, but there's going to be stories that didn't appeal to them. There's going to be stories that they never got a chance to read. There are millions of books worldwide. Indeed. But yeah, there are millions of books and stories worldwide, and I think it's always good to broaden one's horizons. And that, I think, is where the crux of the issue comes into it. If you say these books are bad, don't read, these classics are bad, don't read them, you are limiting your horizon. If you say these books are the only books you should read, everything else is inferior garbage, you once again are limiting your horizons. I think I said broaden your horizons a second ago, so I apologize.
You're fine. You're fine.
And my last thing I'm going to say before I open this up to people is that in terms of having a series of books that should be taught in school, I do actually think that we should not be looking at the books that, in terms of what is taught in school, we should not be looking at the books that are the classics, that are held up as the best books. We should actually be looking at the books that are the most popular. Why? Does this mean that those books are good? No. Because I actually think you do yourself, when you are trying to become educated, you do yourself a service by looking at the good and the bad. You do yourself a service by looking at, this book was really popular in its time and really well received. Well, why was that? Is it actually good? Is it perhaps overrated? Well, if it is overrated or bad, like, say, 50 Shades of Grey, though I would recommend not teaching that one in schools, but maybe in college, but, 50 Shades of Grey was enormously popular, but it's terrible. Well, why is that? By understanding why something is popular and what the quality of the book are, you not only learn more about the book, you learn more about people. And I think in many ways, the study of the history of literature, the history of stories, is also a study of people. What appealed to them, what didn't, what hits what hits them and what hits them and what does not. Hey, these books are super popular, but I think they're kind of crap. Well, let's study what made them so popular. And I think you learn a lot more by doing that, by studying, people's reactions to the books, good or bad, and studying books from a wide range of qualities, good books, bad books, etc., than you do being given a book told you are supposed to like this, and then trying to make yourself like it because you are told if you do not, you're inferior. Again, Ark, I apologize, but I have no idea where in this entire conversation I gave you the message, it's a bad thing to like 50 Shades of Grey. I I don't know how I gave that message, gave that impression.
Meanwhile, I do somewhat agree with you. Like, we shouldn't be using the literal canon anymore. However, I don't think using the most popular books is also the right answer. I mean, it's a good answer, but I have an alternative for it, and that is pick up the books that were groundbreaking in literary, like Frankenstein's Monster. It was a horror novel written by a woman, one of the first ones.
Honestly, I think it should be a combination. I think it should be a combination of the two. You should look at the books that are popular, and you should look at the books that are groundbreaking. And also, I think it's important for a person, and this is something that all people, not just students, though, especially students, but all people should be encouraged. Start building up their own literary canon. Children should Children readers should be encouraged to find their own books, network with others, look for recommendations, but, and this is something that my school did, you had the assigned class readings, etc., but you also were encouraged to go to the library and pick up a book for yourself. Find something that was interesting to you, that appealed to you. And because of that, because I myself had the freedom to read what I wanted, that helped make me an avid reader. Imagine, and I think for a lot of you, a lot of us became avid readers because we had the freedom and the choice to read what we wanted. Okay, Ark, again, how on earth do you think that I said you liked it? It's like I'm saying good morning, how are you, and you hear good night, you fucking bitch. Like, how are we getting this opposite in our communications? Also, honey, I when it comes to like, I disagree. I agree with your conclusion, but not your premise. And we should never say it is common sense to like this book or to dislike this book. That is kind of my argument, that you should never start from the premise of this book is good or this book is bad. Here's why you are supposed to think this way. Now, I agree. 50 Shades, genuinely a bad book. I have heard enough arguments for that reason to agree with it. But it's a conclusion that someone should reach from looking at the book rather than being told this is how you are supposed to think and there's something wrong with you if you don't think that way. Anyway, like, but going back to what I was saying with Dogi, like, I agree, like, you should study books that are groundbreaking for the same reason that you should study Citizen Kane. You should look at, these are the books that are influential, though I do have a counterpoint to that, but I'll get to that in a second. Like, these are the books that had a huge influence on storytelling. These should be looked at, but you should also, I think, look at the books that are popular, because these are not only the books that reach a large number of people, but they're not always good books. And because of that, it's a good opportunity to study books that are good, study books that are bad, and also just get an idea, okay, why did this appeal to people? Because you get a better understanding of humanity. And I think that is part of the equation of studying storytellers, is to study the people that read and enjoy them. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, of course, because again, part of the point of this is that your reading experience should... Oh, that makes sense. Perhaps, don't be reading the chat while you listen to what I'm saying then. But anyway, but going back to what I was saying, and of course, because part of the whole idea here... Wow, that's fucked up, honey. That is absolutely fucked up. I'm sorry you experienced that.
Yikes.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, people are creepy.
People are fucking assholes. But like any art, you build up a portfolio, so you should be encouraged to look at the books that are influential. You should be encouraged to look at the books that are popular, and you should be given the freedom to find stories that aren't in any of those categories, or more books in those categories, or just whatever you want to read. Want to start looking at comics? Go ahead. Want to explore the old classics more? Go ahead. Want to find this book on the library in this forgotten corner that you've never heard of? It's not a popular book, but there's something about it that's really interesting to you. So you pick it up and start reading it. Go ahead and use that to build up your own portfolio understanding of stories. Use that to build up your own analytical skills, your own critical reading and thinking skills. Take what works from things, study what doesn't, but you should never be told you have to read these books or you're stupid. That is where the problem starts. And that is a mindset we need to get away from. And if you think, well, that's never been the mindset about the classic. It's been about a case of these books are good and it's good to read them, not you're stupid if you don't. To those people who are saying that, I say, good. It is very good that you not only have the right attitude around these stories, but had teachers or authority figures who instilled that right attitude of giving enthusiasm to these stories, not criticizing you for not enjoying them. But let us face it, that is unfortunately often more the exception than the rule. Unfortunately, there is more of a trend to, and we see this because of how it's portrayed in the media. If you like certain books, you are an intellectual. If you don't, plebeian commoner.
Ain't that the same thing with music?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like like Mozart. If you like and enjoy Mozart, you sir are a man of quality. Like and enjoy the works of Michael Jackson, commoner trash. Same indeed. Same thing for movie. Same thing for movies and shows. Just art in general. Now, let's talk about the attitude and mindset that you were just speaking of doing. Well, let's not mention. I was putting in a few filler words there. Let's talk about the whole studying the influential. While I agree with you, I can also see a bit of a snag, and it's what I'll call the Citizen Kane problem. When you look at a story that is so influential, it's actually it can be hard to study it because the elements that made it stand out and influential at the time are things that are commonplace now. It's the pioneer of certain things, absolutely, but those certain things are all over the place nowadays. At a certain point, what can you actually learn from that besides, oh, there it is, there's that technique? It almost becomes less of a study of the story and more of he said it!
I mean, it is always good thing to learn where certain techniques have originated from.
Alright, I'm actually going to turn this away from storytelling and into an area that you are more an expert on. So, in the realm of visual arts, because I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming you do that with illustrations and visual arts as well. You look at the works of artists who pioneered several of the techniques that you use. Am I correct?
That is how it's supposed to go. However, I enjoy watching art and I enjoy breaking things apart, but that is not how I learned, and I regret that I didn't learn that way.
Okay, your art is still good. It is still fantastic. But I guess the question is, let's say that you crosshatch and you go and look at the very first picture where crosshatching was ever used. What does that actually teach you? Does it teach you, this is where crosshatching was first used? Well,
it'll show me how the cross-hatching, how it originated and how it was originally used, and then I can use that knowledge and knowledge I have accumulated myself over the years and create something new.
okay, but how does seeing the first instance of cross-hatching help you more than seeing any other instance of cross-hatching? Certainly, it's good to learn the technique of cross-hatching. It's a writing technique. But how does going to the source of it teach you anything more than all the other people who used it? It's still ultimately the same technique.
Yeah, fine art history is classes in school. Yeah, it's basically learning the history and where it came from as well. So it's both learning how it originally was used and where it came from. So, yeah. And I know you don't care much about that.
No, that is actually a good. That is actually a good argument. I think it becomes a case of, for example, go back to the fiction example and look at then look at Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. It's important to know that all science fiction started with Frankenstein, especially since it shows just how deeply science fiction and horror have always been tied together, which that's actually another thing that I think we could discuss in a second, but I'm putting a bookmark in that. But anyway, it's important to know and understand where science fiction came from. It came from Frankenstein. It also, I think, is good to read Frankenstein on its own merit. But let's say you want to learn where science fiction came from, and you are told it came from Frankenstein, and you go read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein to learn where science fiction came from, and you come of it learning it came from Frankenstein. Well, you already knew that. You picked up the book because you were told this is where science fiction came from. Reading the book itself didn't actually tell you anything new about the history of science fiction. You already knew science fiction originated here. And same with like looking at the first instance of cross-stitching. Now, it probably should be looked at for its own merits of, hey, here's a good piece of art, let's take a look at it. But if you're looking for the art piece to learn the history of cross-stitching, well, you already know the history of cross-stitching. It came from here. You were just told that.
Yeah, it's just appreciating the piece of history while also picking up the parts of, okay, this is how it's science fiction. This is how science fiction was back in the day. And possibly learning new tricks, like, let's say it's a writing trick. And there's a certain string of words that you realize is building up the tension. Now, I'm not saying copy instantly what the same sentence, but you can look how the sentence is structured and use similar sentencing later on in your own writing to build up tension. You can do that with all the other books, but it's always best to go with the first one so you can build up on that.
I think that's an excellent point. I would disagree that it's always best to go with the first one, because again, the whole premise of this is there shouldn't be an example of automatically best. But I do agree, it's good to, one, appreciate something for its own merits. It is also good to look at how genres were back in the old days compared to now, because it's a good idea to have a look at how things have changed over time, I think.
Yeah, like I said, just like every story, it has to start from the beginning. Well, not has to, quote unquote. Basically, once you know the rules, you can break them as much as you want. Break every single rule you can. Just please learn the rules first, basically.
I mean, as you said, you haven't learned a lot of the rules, and your style is still quite strong. Which
I'll put it this way: I did learn the rules eventually, and I wish I had learned them earlier on instead of having to break my learnings 5 times over.
Fair enough. But I also would argue that doing things your way is what helped to make your style unique and distinct.
Yeah, learn rules so you can break them is a common wisdom, and I'll admit, if I had learned the rules first and all that, my style would have developed so much faster.
Fair enough.
Or reconstruct or contextualize the rules. That is also something you can do.
Indeed.
This is why
No, I just said indeed.
Yeah. So yeah, this is why I say check out the origins at least at one point. Just for one, so you can learn the rules, so you can break them better, and two, to appreciate the originals.
Indeed. And I think this is a healthier way of looking at the classics, of something to be looked at in terms of their influence, though again this is also, as someone pointed out, an argument against a lot of the classics, because there are a lot of influential works that aren't in the classics, because again, not everyone has read everything, and there is always going to be gaps in everyone's knowledge. But it's but this is a much more healthier way to look at them, as a teaching tool of, hey, here's where stuff comes from, as opposed to the mindset of, you have to like this or you will be judged as a person. Speaking of which, of good mindsets versus bad mindsets, those who have said good wisdom is learn the rules so you can learn how to break them. But let's face it, a lot of what is taught is not learn the rules and you will learn good ways to break them. It is learn the rules and obey them strictly.
Yeah, that is unfortunately mindset some people have. But as I've gotten older and I've actually increased the sphere of influence, I've only had one teacher who told me that you must follow the rules exactly. One art teacher, and she was by far my least favorite, mostly because she kept complaining about everything I did.
Indeed. Though I wonder if that is because that mindset is less common, or because you surrounded yourself with more teachers who were, actually good at their job.
I
And
don't think I
also,
surrounded myself with those teachers. I was assigned those teachers.
and fair enough. Also, there's also the mentality, I think, like for actual art teachers, this mentality is less common, because when you are a teacher, you're usually, pretty good at the subject. But I think but I think amongst the public, amongst most people who aren't well educated in the subject, it becomes, oh, you have to follow the techniques. How often do you submit your amateur writing online to be critiqued by Reddit, and the people in Reddit say, oh, you didn't use a 3-act structure, so your story is bad? Do you know that makes it make bad? Well, I read somewhere that you're supposed to use a 3-act structure, so he didn't have a 3-act structure, so the story is bad?
Ah, so you're talking about idiots. Got it.
That's most of the population. Unfortunately, stupidity is what most people learn.
Um, I actually haven't had that many people saying those things to me, and usually when someone tries, or if anyone has tried, I usually just say, hey, this doesn't follow the typical 3-act story because it's written in different style. There is more styles than 3-act story.
Indeed. And perhaps the armchair expert's problem is far less common than I believe. That is always a possibility.
Yeah, like
But sorry.
it happens. It happens, but it's not as widespread phenomenon infection that you think. It's just the idiots are louder.
Mm, I have my
Or
I
yeah.
cannot prove one way or the other. All I will say is I have my skepticism. I am always very skeptical when people say that the stupid are the minority.
Oh, I didn't say they're the minority. I just say they're the loudest.
True. But I am always of the belief that the stupid are nine that the stupid are the most common. I mean, I believe everyone's an idiot at one point or another, but I'm talking about the set fire to the species, stupid.
Let's face it, what they think our rules are in reality guidelines, yeah.
Indeed. But I'm going to move on to a different subject, one, before I get too cynical, and two, because I think there was, in terms of the actual point of the subject of rules versus guidelines, we make good points. As we mentioned before, this is something I find interesting. Science fiction has, from its roots, been tied heavily to horror. And yet nowadays, I think when we think of science fiction, we don't associate it with horror, we associate it with fantasy. And I wonder when the mood and the tone of science fiction started to change from monster movies and alien invasions to fantastical adventures amongst the stars. I know Star Wars was probably the story that influenced this change the most. That was like the spearhead for fantasy going from horror and monsters to adventure and space wizards. But
yeah, Star Wars and Star Trek.
Indeed, but those had their own influences. Those Star Wars, for example, was heavily influenced by Flash Gordon. But was Flash Gordon inspired by something? That is my curiosity. And also, when it comes to influences, and that's the other thing, is that there's influence of where something started, but there's also the moment that the thing that codified something or made it actually a big thing. Like The Vampire, which was written by a colleague of Mary Shelley, was one of the first gothic vampire stories. But let's face it, Dracula, which came after, was the one that made it explode into the public consensus.
Yep.
Was that old extra credits or new extra credits? But I am now going to be opening the floor up to comments and questions from others, including yourself, Mr. Dagogagogagogagogagogagi.
God damn it! Stop doing that!
No.
Stop!
Okay.
Can't remember, but both versions are good.
New extra credits has problems. Like, new extra credits is the one that started saying microtransactions are good, actually. Plenty. Plenty of authors who are unorthodox or controversial, in their methods have things to teach us. If they are unorthodox, but you find them successful, it allows you to learn a brand new technique. If they are unorthodox or controversial, and you think that they failed, you can study. Okay, so what was their idea? Where are they going with this? And where did they trip and fall over? When you look at an unorthodox writer, you are eventually looking at a brand new technique. In fact, I almost feel that this is just as helpful, if not more helpful, than looking at the classics. Because the classics and that's kind of the thing. And that's actually a good way to point out what I was getting at. When you look at the most influential authors, you should look at them for I think it's good to appreciate the history of storytelling, and they probably have their own merits to be enjoyed. But in the realm of studying technique, it almost becomes pointless because they're repeated so often that it's ubiquitous. It's like looking at It's like going to the first ever building that was made by laying bricks to learn what bricklaying looks like. You find a random house, you'll know what bricklaying looks like. But when you look at the weird, unorthodox, controversial techniques, you can find something new, or if you find a controversial technique or unorthodox technique that doesn't work, it gives you a better appreciation for the orthodox techniques. It shows you by demonstration, so this is why we use the orthodox, because this is why we follow these rules, because here's an example of someone not following the rules and it falls apart. Give me a second. Well, here's the thing. H.P. Lovecraft was not unorthodox or controversial in his methods. He was controversial, especially in modern times, in his views, and I think that's something different. There's a difference between the views of a person in terms of politics and mentality, mindset, etc., and their writing techniques. Now, in my opinion on H.P. Lovecraft, his attitude was absolutely wrong and 100% should not be condoned, but it is also important to remember Lovecraft legitimately had a phobia. And it wasn't... When people talk about, xenophobia, homophobia, etc., we use the term phobia almost in jest. But no, Lovecraft legitimately had an actual, honest-to-God, medical phobia. And no, it wasn't actually a phobia of black people. That was a symptom of the problem. It was a phobia of pretty much everything. The entire outside world. The fear of the unknown was an actual crippling medical phobia for this man. One that, as I understand it, he did try to get past and learn better as he got older, but unfortunately died before that could ever really come to fruition. And let's also face it, while his attitude towards the unknown and towards people of color and anything different from him was extreme, even by the standards of his time, the way that the era treated not only mental health, but prejudice, there was only so much help he was going to be able to get. Let's face it, their mentality is, no. You shouldn't say that black people shouldn't exist. That's far too extreme. Oh, okay. You should instead say that black people are inferior subhuman garbage who exist to serve us. Oh, I understand now. That's much more tolerant. Indeed. Aren't we good progressive people? Yep. Again, it was a terrible time to live with a phobia of the unknown. It's one of those, when people say that J.R. Tolkien is racist, do I believe that he would be seen as racist today? It's almost undeniable. He lived in an area where extremely racist views were seen as commonplace and accepted. The guy would have to be a goddamn saint in order to avoid picking up some attitudes that would be seen as very uncomfortable today. But by the standards of his time, he was a man that put effort into being a tolerant human being, who put effort into being less racist than his culture was, and many of the things that people hold up as examples of here's why Tolkien was racist, like the orcs, is actually a case where, Tolkien himself said, I don't like that the orcs were presented as all evil, because I don't believe that there could ever be a group of people who are just born evil. That is troublesome to me, and I'm actually bothered by this element in my own writing. I intended the orcs to be more a representation of horrible warlike people than an actual literal race, but I kind of think I've written myself into a corner where I'm presenting a race of people as inherently evil. This is problematic, even to me.
Yep.
Oh, speaking of which, in terms of the fantasy races and stuff, just to get a little off topic, but we are technically in the free form aspect of this podcast now. The controversy around the D&D races, I think I found out what has created a lot of the problems. In the 3.5 Monster Manual, races like orcs, goblins, were demons, etc., their alignments were given prefixes such as often, always, or often chaotic evil, usually chaotic evil, always chaotic evil. And it was directly stated that the prefixes like often or usually meant these races are not inherently evil, but they are living in an evil culture. They should be seen less analogous to, oh, you're born in this race, therefore you must be evil, and more like, say, someone living in colonial era Britain. A undeniably evil culture, but not every single person who lived in that culture was just born a baby-eating psychopath. The ones that were designated as always evil, as in you are actually born evil, were things like undead monsters, literal demons. Oh yeah, that is an actual story. You can actually find the quote. Tolkien fucking hated the Nazis. He quote unquote called Hitler a ruddy little ignoramus. Which is the early 20th century equivalent of saying to someone, "Shut the fuck up, you utter dumbass."
You snail-sucking weed in the garden of knowledge.
Indeed. But the problem, again, on the D&D side of things, the problem is that the 5th edition Monster Manual, and I understand they were probably trying to simplify things, but they did away with that little prefix, so now an orc is not often chaotic evil, it is just straight up chaotic evil. So it starts to feel like less like a matter of culture and more like an inherent thing. And I am just reading back up the chat and leaving things open for, again, other comments or questions, because once again, we are, as I said, in the free-form part of this podcast. But I hope I made my statement and thesis on the classics clear, that it is not that they are bad or shouldn't be listened to, it is the attitude of them being the only books that you are allowed to enjoy if you want to be considered to be a person worthy of acknowledgement, and that is the bad attitude, and you shouldn't ever limit your range of readings. And it is helpful to learn and study the bad stories as it is to learn and study the good stories. Okay, excellent. Indeed. there is a reason why when looking at like wrestling shows, yes, I like looking at wrestling stuff. Yes, I'm curious about the good stuff, the stuff that people consider to be like examples of great professional wrestling, but I also like to look at the stuff that people consider mediocre or people consider, oh god, that's terrible.
Hey?
No, that I like to look at stuff that people consider terrible as well. All right, give me a second. I want to look something up if you, ladies, gentlemen, and the fabulous non-binary do not mind. Yes, Stogie, please entertain us. Please entertain our audience.
I hope you enjoyed this low-res rendition of Chocobo Jam.
That's what you were humming.
Yeah, I'm again still in the game. I decimated the Bluebell. Leave me alone, Fate. I decimated the Bluebell population, and I'm crashing the market if I fish any more of those. So I had to run off and do something else. Or go fish somewhere else real quick. Why is there a giant fucking scorpion here? Ew. Go away. Oh, it's not a scorpion, it's a mite. Dire mite. It's big. That's all you need to know. It's giant. Huh, 8 legs. And a stinger. Okay, let's see. I am fishing in a lake. So you.
Speaking of animated children's stories that told animated children's stories, there was a series that I used to watch, which was animated depictions of myths and legends from native Australians. I've kind of been trying to find it again because it was very interesting, and at some point there was one story that was legitimately it was basically about one tribe genociding another, and it was legit. I saw this when I was 5. It was legitimately terrifying to me. But there were other but it was also just a really interesting series, and one that is one that is often put on in shared in schools, and for good reason.
Oops, I did not put the chat up. Come on. There we go. Now you can see you guys. You're no longer invisible!
Hallelujah!
Hallelujah. Hallelujah! Okay, I'll stop.
So I haven't I haven't had a chance to read that series myself, but from listening to things like macabre storytelling's rewrites of the Game of Thrones TV series, where he shows his strong appreciation for the books, I feel that the books are simultaneously overhyped and underhyped. for the people who overhype it, I think they often treat it as the only books that do certain X, Y, or Z things. And for the people who underhype it, I think the series runs into what I will call the Dark Souls problem, where people say, oh, it's only good because it's got tits and gore and rape and terrible people, and that's why people like it because they're edgelords. The same way that some people say, oh, people only like Dark Souls because it's difficult, and let's face it, the marketing around both is often the same thing. You know, the marketing around Dark Souls is how difficult it is. The marketing around Game of Thrones is how edgy and grim and gritty it is. But because of that, people miss the other things that are good about it. They miss the really well-written dialogue. They miss the character arcs that are genuinely interesting. They miss the fact that Martin is actually really good at creating plots. They miss his writing style of basically, here are 5 people, they all want something. Now we're basically watching a game of chess between them as they all try to get what they want while dealing not just with each other, but with their own personal hang-ups and mistakes, all of which is genuinely good writing. And same with Dark Souls, like, oh hey, there's a really interesting world, fascinating lore, beautiful locations, but everyone just talks about how, you know, but everyone just talks about how hard it is. And that's the thing. I think a lot of people miss that if you took all the gore, all the rape, all the sex, all the edgy stuff out of Game of Thrones, you'd still have a good story. Those things add flavor to the story. Some people like that flavor, other people don't. But the story still holds up even without those things. Are you asking me, Ark? If there's something you would like to ask me again, just repeat yourself. Indeed, but I wonder, like, how much of that stuff is more about the marketing, and like, and how much of that stuff is actually Martin's own approach to things. Because I think what happened later on with the movies, sorry, not the movies, the TV show, was the writers thought, oh, well, people like this because of the gore and the shocking deaths and the, oh my god, I didn't see that coming twist, so we just throw in a bunch of those and it's good, right? No.
No.
But one thing I will go against, against Martin for is his attitude of basically saying that, Tolkien had Aragorn made a good king and then he never thought about the consequences of that. Now, I believe that Tolkien just needed to end the story somewhere and wanted to give it a happy ending, but Tolkien put so much thought into the detail of his world that I highly doubt that he just didn't think of this stuff or didn't consider it. And that is an area where I feel that Martin, and this is an interview from Martin himself, got a bit too full of himself. Indeed. Like, that is where I feel that the stories do become a little bit overhyped, because to actually quote one of Martin's own characters, You say this as if you think you're the first man to ever come up with it. Eh, I feel that his level of details in his writing was a flaw in his work. Having details is good, immersion is good, but I believe that Tolkien went a bit too far in that direction.
I'll have to read those books in English, preferably, because I've only seen the movies and I'm scared of starting the books because they're so thick. But I'm someone who really likes writing details into stuff.
Indeed. By the way, here is
Mm-hmm.
something I find kind of amusing when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of being able to quote certain things making you more intelligent. The idea of, oh, this person quotes Shakespeare. He's a smart character. Have a think about it, okay? If one of the most important aspects of any story is communication, to be able to communicate your ideas. Now, this does not mean your ideas cannot be challenging. This does not mean your ideas cannot make people think or make people question things. But if you cannot communicate your ideas clearly, then that is actually an example of you failing to do your job. Because stories are a form of communication. They're a way of getting ideas, concepts, etc. across to other people. Now, if someone can clearly remember something, if you say something to 1,000 people and 1,000 people clearly remember what you said, then that, I think, is a good example that you did your job as a communicator exceptionally well. That's quote, that soundbite, thousands of people remember that clearly and can repeat it off the top of their head. Multiple quotes from you, and wow, like you are really doing a good job. But that's a catch-20. I don't think I'm using that term correctly, but let's say on the opposite, thousands of people, millions of people heard your story and they don't remember any of it. But one person does. One person remembers this quote and that quote. And he's like, oh, I can quote. You guys can't quote the works of Shay Home? Well, I can. I can quote. I remember this quote and that quote and this other quote. Now, here's the thing. If the purpose of a story is communication, if only one guy, one special snowflake can remember the content and the quotes of your story, does that mean he's a smarter person? Or does that mean that your story was actually bad because so few people were able to remember and quote it? Because it failed to communicate? And that's kind of the irony. By holding up the pedestal that only a few people can quote these stories, and quoting these stories puts you in a special pedestal of the elite. You're not making yourself sound smart, you're making the story sound worse. You are essentially saying this story was so bad at communication, was so bad at the core purpose of a story, that only a handful of people can even remember a few lines from it. That doesn't make Shakespeare sound like a special great story. It's actually an insult to it. And I think a lot of people have, Shakespeare especially is a good example, because a lot of people have made the comment that Shakespeare was a story meant to be enjoyed by the millions, not a story that was only meant and intended to be read and enjoyed by the elite few. Hello, my love.
Apologies, we've been at it for over 2 hours. I'm starting to
Indeed,
lag.
we will be wrapping up very soon. I apologize for that, darling. But also, hello, DSF Studios. Again, I apologize. You got near the tail end.
I am very eepy.
Indeed. Like I said, we shall be wrapping up quite soon. But to answer your question, Matt, Witcher series I haven't really read, played, or watched. I experienced a little with them. The Wheel of Time series I have actually experienced even less. The closest I had was. So, want to hear a little bit of exposition? Want to hear a little bit of background story about Yu-Gi-Oh! Academy, Dogi?
Sure.
The Mad Kings, the main antagonist for Season 4 in that RP, in the original version of it, they were explicitly based on the villains from the Wheel of Time series, to the point of their original name was not the Mad Kings, but instead it was, I think it was either like the Forsaken or the Forsworn.
Huh.
They were just straight up Wheel of Time copies. The point where the original GM was like, so here are the Wheel of Time characters, and these are the characters that I'm copying. It was essentially it tended to be a Wheel of Time Yu-Gi-Oh! Crossover. I decided to go in a different direction for
good idea.
For the remake. I know Ash has read the Wheel of Time series, and I know he was not a fan. No, I know that the original, so the original ones were called the Forsaken, and for East Academy, like the Wheel of Time, it's called the Forsaken, and for the original East Academy, the GM of that was like, oh no, we're not fighting the Forsaken, we're fighting the Forsworn.
I hear Yu-Gi-Oh!
Indeed. Anyway, though, I believe that is a good place to wrap up, because before we start, because I answered the question, I don't want to start any new topic that might take another 10 minutes. So, everyone, first of all, for our newcomers, I sincerely apologize that we were wrapping up just as you joined, but it is getting quite early for my co-host and quite late for several other people. Hopefully, we will be at an earlier time next week, and hopefully we actually do this next week.
It's 8:30 a.m. Next week we are gonna have to start earlier.
Jesus Christing fuck.
I've been awake all night.
I am sorry. Okay, so everyone, I hope you enjoyed our second episode. I hope you all have a lovely evening, night, or in Doggy's case, morning, but sleep anyway. And I bid you all adieu.
Night.